For me, I just got tired of not being happy. I got tired of playing this comparison game about who I used to be. And I'm like, I'm not her anymore, but I'm still cool, and I was just like torturing myself. Like, what am I doing? I know I'm not going to make the 2020 Olympic team. I know that by then my time will have passed. I can't go back in time. I'm living in this purgatory for what? Like, why am I doing this to myself? It's time to release a lot of it and meet me where I am.
Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspects of running and what helps people to achieve success, however they define it, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. This episode is brought to you by Freedom Solar Power. When I first started looking into solar, I thought it would be a clunky and expensive process. I've learned it isn't nearly as hard as you think. Freedom Solar Power makes it simple. They provide a turnkey solution that is focused on educating their customers on the experience from installation to everyday use and savings. They ensure you have all the information needed to make sure going solar is right for you. From firsthand experience, it makes sense both financially and for the environment. With no down payment required, solar not only adds immediate value to your home, but it's also great for the environment and might even provide immediate savings, not to mention the year-end tax benefits, a credit of 26% this year. Freedom Solar operates in Texas, Colorado, Virginia, and Florida, and there are plenty of other great options nationwide. Tracksmith is an independent running brand inspired by a deep love of the sport. Their summer collection, inspired by the blue hues of summer watering holes, is now available and features staples thoughtfully designed for training. From their race day ready Van Cortlandt singlet cut from Tracksmith's signature 209 mesh to the Alston half tights and shorts built to provide a sleek fit and a minimal silhouette, these pieces are built to work as hard as you do. I recently tried their Twilight shorts and loved them. They gave me the silky and lightweight feel and a longer inseam length I like for training days. By using the code FORTHELONGRUN at checkout, all one word, you can receive free shipping and support the Michael J. Fox Foundation, as 5% of your purchase amount will be donated. I'm really excited to introduce our newest podcast sponsor, Previnex. Many of you may have heard of Previnex and their joint health supplement, Joint Health Plus, which is a great joint health supplement that has become a go-to for many, many runners. But I actually want to tell you about a completely different product that has had an amazing impact on my health. First, for those of you who don't know Previnex, they make clinically effective supplements that promote longevity, performance, and everyday health, and they donate vitamins to malnourished children with every order, which is really cool. Most importantly, and I can tell you this from firsthand experience, their products are awesome and flat out work. So, for full transparency, I've struggled with GI issues for many years, which definitely has negatively impacted my running and health. I was diagnosed with IBS and have always had to go to the bathroom a bunch of times before getting out the door and hitting the trails or the road. I started taking Previnex's probiotic a few months ago, and my GI issues got so much better. I know I can't pin it on one change, but progress is progress. I was surprised, but when I took the probiotic with me on a visit to my sports dietitian, she wasn't. Previnex's probiotic has 30 billion healthy bacteria per serving, 6 clinically proven bacteria strains that address 6 different areas of digestive health, and a clinically proven prebiotic which helps with the growth and colonization of healthy bacteria in the gut. This episode is brought to you by Goucher. Goucher has the slickest shades around for only $25 and $35. They don't slip or bounce, and they stay on my face way better than more expensive sunglasses do. If you'd like to support me and the show, treat yourself to a pair or 2 or 3 of Gouchers and head over to Goucher.com and get 15% off your entire order with the code FTLR. That's 15% off at Goucher.com, code FTLR. Your face will thank you. And welcome back. I have Kara Goucher joining me here in Boulder. Kara, thanks for going round 2 here with me.
Thanks. This is fun. We usually chit-chat on our runs together, so we could just sit here and actually look at each other today.
To my knowledge, those conversations aren't recorded, but the iPhone is always listening. So Kara and I first chatted on the podcast back in 2019, episode 34. If you want to listen to that one afterwards, dive into it. Please don't judge my interviewing skills, but we've shared a lot of miles since then, and it's been cool hearing what Kara has been doing in the sport, how she's been getting after it lately and not getting after it lately, and everything in between physically as well as what she's doing as a race announcer. So I'm sure we'll talk about that. I'm sure we'll talk about sponsorship. We'll probably talk about dogs and maybe cats. I don't know. But for those who somehow don't know, who is Kara Goucher?
Oh, geez. Well, I'm a mom of a middle schooler, which is totally crazy.
You're a middle schooler?
I'm a
No, I'm
mom of
kidding.
a middle schooler. I still am really passionate about running. I don't run as much as I'd want to or like to, but I still run. And yeah, I don't know. I'm sponsored by Wazel and Ultra, who have really embraced me at where I'm at in this stage of my life. So, oh, and I do announcing as well. Yes, yes.
So when we finished our run a couple weeks ago, I made some comment on Twitter or somewhere. I was like, the best is yet to come for Kara in terms of her impact on the sport. Why is it so important for you that it's not just about Kara Goucher, the runner? It's not just about your accomplishments, but instead helping others improve. It seems like it's been something you've cared about and focused on for your career, especially now. So why is it such a priority for you?
I mean, running just it had such a huge positive impact on my life. It really, I was so shy. I had some tragedy as a younger kid, and it really like turned my life around into something that I was passionate about, met amazing people, ended up traveling the world because of running and really just like meeting incredible people and learning I was stronger than I thought. And so I just want people to experience that. And I want people to experience that at every level, but at the elite level, I want to protect it. It gave me so much opportunity. It gave my husband so much opportunity. And I want to see mini Kara and mini Adams be able to have those same opportunities.
What is it like seeing Colt start to run and play sports and like find the passion for it? I know we've talked about him and cross country and running, and he's excited, to run 6-minute miles and whatnot. What does that feel like for you?
I think I was putting him to bed last year after his third or fourth day of practice ever in cross country. And he said, Mom, I feel so alive when my lungs are burning. And I had never felt closer to him than in that moment, because I also was obsessed with the way it made me feel. And so it's really fun to watch him discover it. We are so hands off to the point where it's almost obnoxious, because I don't want him to ever say like he felt pressure from us or that he felt the expectation. He has been running a mile twice a week for the last few weeks to get ready for his middle school cross country season, which starts Wednesday. And, I would love to volunteer to coach. I'd love to do all those things, but I really try to just stay out of it and let it be his. But watching him run last year, and like he'd be in the hurt locker, but he'd keep going. And it taught me actually a lot about him, because not everybody can do that. Not everybody can enter that pain cave. And so I remember Dathan said that kid can ride that pain cave. And I'm like, I know, because he was only running twice a week and then racing on the weekend, right? So he just didn't have that sort of fitness, but he liked it. He learned a lot about himself. He improved a lot. Yeah, he became obsessed with this idea of breaking a 6-minute mile, which I don't know when it will happen, but it will happen for him sometime.
And so do you ever see pieces of yourself in him when he's running?
Yeah, I mean, he looks exactly like Adam when he's running, and everyone tells me, and I'm like, yeah, I know, but there's a lot of it that I see myself in. I see the way he'll be in that hurting place, and he'll look at me like his last race of the year where he set a huge personal best. He passed me and said, Mommy, because he was in so much pain. He hasn't called me Mommy in like 5 years, but he finished. And not only did he finish, he kicked, And so I just see a lot of myself in him. I really love to ride that line. I was shocked at how like hard I was willing to dig. But when I actually like see him floating along, I see Adam.
Do you feel there's some sense of legacy between you and Adam and what Colt is doing now?
Yeah, it's really difficult, I think, in sports now, especially youth sport. They're expected to be so committed so early. And we've had to move away from different sports over the years because they wanted such a commitment. And so I think one of our legacies is that we want Colt to do what Colt wants to do. And Colt is in 6th grade. And if he wants to play football and run cross country and play the trumpet, he's going to do all of that, right? And if we have a coach that says he can't do that, then we're probably going to move away from that program. I think, Adam and I are really passionate about letting kids be kids. And I think I see that more as our legacy of like allowing kids to develop when they're ready to develop and not pushing it on them like we see other parents.
We've talked a lot about family over many miles. Talk to me about your relationship with family and parents and grandparents. And you had a tragic incident when you were younger. Did that cement the importance of family?
Yeah, I think, when my dad died, we immediately moved in with my grandparents in Minnesota. So my grandparents came with us to New York. My grandfather actually ID'd my father's body in the morgue. And then we packed up the house and moved in with them and eventually got our own house and everything. But I think, I feel like sometimes when horrible tragedies like that happen, something beautiful comes from it. And for me, it was this very close relationship with my grandparents. I mean, like second parents. I mean, not a single tear off of how I feel about my mom. And so I grew up with these, they showed me what a good marriage was. They showed me what dedicating your life to your children is like. They showed me hard work. They showed me all these things. And I think losing my dad made me definitely closer to them, closer to my mom, more appreciative of the relationship I have with my sisters. And it is a huge part of my life is carving out time for a family. I didn't do as good of a job when I was racing at the elite level. And at the end of my career, I started to realize that I was starting to regret that I wasn't spending more time with them. So I feel thankful that I realized that and sort of switched the priorities in my life before it was too late. But I really love my family. I love Adam's family. And yeah, family is just so important to me. Having those connections, having those relationships, being there for each other because they're the ones that are going to be there at your lowest moments and they're not going to, hesitate to be there.
And it's so interesting. It's like we focus so much on times and splits and races and performances and whatnot. And I think it was Scott Fauble. I was chatting with him on the podcast in 2020. And he was like, look, at the end of the day, like my girlfriend's still going to love me if I have a poor performance. And that's all that matters. And it's such a like strong grounding. Like look at a dog, right? Does a dog give a shit about whether you got a promotion or whether well, maybe then you get better treats. I don't know. But they don't know, right?
They don't know. No, it's so true. And like, even when I was in high school, if I had a disappointing race, my mom would be like, well, you were the prettiest one out there. And I'd finally be like, I don't care about being pretty. I want to be fast, but like, I do feel so supported by them. And everybody knows my grandpa's the one that got me into running. And my grandpa's really kept me in running, especially like when I went through puberty and I was struggling, like he would always be like, I believe in you, kid, So I just feel like they're so much a part of everything. And I was also lucky to have family that was really invested in my success and was really invested in my dreams because not everybody has that. But between my family and then as I got older, Adam's family, everyone was like really invested in what I wanted and what I was trying to do. And so obviously it makes it easier to love your family and embrace your family when you have that type of a relationship.
Very true. And I very much agree. When we first spoke in 2019 on the podcast, you were just coming off of the Leadville Trail Marathon.
Yeah.
Of which you called the hardest thing you'd ever done, including childbirth.
Yep, without a doubt.
I was recently in Leadville, and wow, running is hard there. I ran a couple of miles. I can't imagine the marathon or the 100-miler that just happened this weekend. Anyway, your relationship with running has certainly evolved over the years. I think if a relationship with running doesn't evolve, then that should be evaluated. But I'm curious, what does it look like today? And do you reflect on that evolution and how things have changed?
Yeah, I do. When I was younger, I thought, when I can't run fast anymore, I just won't run anymore. And then
why?
Because like I grew up running to be fast, right? I started running for time with my grandpa, and then I found out I was good at it, and then I ran to be fast, and I didn't think that I had a value in running unless I was fast. And so I really, like in 2012, if you would have told me I'd be super excited to go run 8 miles with you, like where I'm not working towards anything. I'd be like, no.
Conversational.
Yeah, like just to hang out. I'd be like, no. And like, all right, I have a friend that I run with twice a week who's getting ready for New York. His goal is to run 4 hours. And I just would be like, oh, no, I'd probably like do something else with my time. But I really have, evolved through it. And I mean, I knew that was always there because even when I was not running well in high school or college, it still was like the thing that would get me through stuff. So I always knew I really, really loved it. But it's been later in life that I've just really appreciated it. And again, I just feel like gratitude to have been introduced to it by my grandpa because without him, I never would have run. I would have played soccer because my dad was a soccer player. My sisters were both excellent soccer players. I just didn't get tired, but I wasn't necessarily like good, And so I never even would have tried it probably without him.
And then let's roll back to last summer. You had it taken away from you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm still learning what that is, right? Like I had a Botox treatment about 4 months ago. And I'm just the kind of person that's like, just cut it out, operate, pull it out, fix it, shoot it, like whatever you need to
Bop
do.
it.
Yeah, I don't care, just do it. And so when I got the Botox, I thought it was going to be an immediate change, and it wasn't. And that was, I'm just like a glass half full person. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have my days where I'm very upset and depressed, but in general, I'm always like, no, this is going to work out. This is going to work out. And so that was hard, but I did realize as the summer went on, I was starting to run a little bit on pavement here and there without slipping. And then, but now I'm kind of back to where I was. And I have another Botox treatment this week that I'm super excited about. But, it was interesting that when I got the confirmation of my diagnosis of dystonia, that doctor really was like, you have to stop running. You cannot run. So I didn't run for like 2 weeks. And then my neurologist here in Colorado was like, that's crazy. He doesn't know you, like, sure, if you ran twice a week and it's debilitating, but like you used to run 135 miles a week. Right. So what can we get where you're happy and you feel fulfilled? And so it's frustrating because I still don't have an answer of what it's going to look like, and my goals keep getting kind of like smaller and smaller. But my goal right now is to run Boulder with my son next year. And that is a huge goal because I have not been able to run more than about a half mile on pavement in over a year. But that's like what I'm focused on. That is my Olympic Games.
For someone at your level where Olympic medals have been the goal in the past, how do you rectify that? Where it's like, I want to win gold in London, or I want to run Boulder in an hour and a half with Colt.
Yeah, it's been humbling, right? I mean, aging has been humbling in general, getting slower, realizing I couldn't push my body the way I used to. And I know you talk to a lot of athletes that are like, age is just a number, and it is, but there's also like some physiology behind it, right? So
Ritual had an interesting guest on his podcast recently. He's like 100 years old, and he's got a bunch of world records in the marathon at like 91 and 94.
Yeah.
And it's just like, but these are outliers, but it's aspirational.
And I think like, I was still setting my own goals, even though they weren't going to make an Olympic team, but they had shifted, right? Like I wanted to run Leadville Marathon. Then I wanted to run an ultra marathon. Then I wanted to run a 50 miler. Last year, that was my goal, is to run a 50 miler. Obviously, it ended up going out the window, but I still would like to do that. I mean, I can't even believe I just said that out loud because I feel like I finally put that to bed. But part of me is like, well, if I had Botox recently and then the terrain was mostly on crushed gravel, I feel like I could do that, So I still have a lot of things that I want to do. They're just different. But the crazy thing is, it still gives me just as much joy as it did when the goal was an Olympic medal. And I think that was the place that was interesting to get to because I didn't think I would be able to get that much joy out of that kind of stuff if it wasn't an Olympic medal on the line, right? But when it's really just intrinsic motivation of, I want to run for 50 miles without stopping. I mean, obviously you have to eat and change your shoes or whatever, but or I want to run 6.25 miles on pavement with my son. It is just as rewarding when I can get there. Like when I finished that North Face 50K, I wanted to die, but I also—
It was flat, right?
Yeah, thanks. But it also, I was one of my proudest moments, like accomplishing that. So it's crazy how the world works and how you're just the way you see things evolves over time.
What does success mean to you? And speaking of evolution, how has that definition evolved over the years for you?
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not going to lie. Like when I started slowing down and I had a hard time staying healthy, I was in a low spot. Like when I didn't make the team in 2016 until 2018, I would say I was in a very low place, frustrated, angry, bitter a little bit. I could have never done commentating back then because I would be like, I could kick her ass. You know what I mean? Just like not a great place. Honestly, turning 40, as cheesy as it sounds, I feared it because I remember when my mom turned 40 and it was like over the hill and it was in the paper and all this stuff. So I feared it. But honestly, that moment when I woke up that morning, I felt like this huge sense of relief. Like I'm a master now, right? Like I'm not supposed to be running world record times or making Olympic teams. Like, yeah, that can still happen. But like that, there's a reason why there's a master's category. And so like turning 40 was this huge thing in my life, honestly. And then I just started to accept where I am. And that's kind of what I've rolled with for the last 4 years is just trying to accept where I am right now and being grateful for where I am right now. So in that sense, I stopped trying to go back and do workouts that I used to do. I was still running with Mark and Heather. They were still meeting me for workouts. I had 0 races on the calendar. But instead of trying to repeat workouts from 2015, we just started being where I am. And so, I mean, in 2019, I ran like a marathon, a half marathon, a trail marathon, an ultra marathon, another half marathon. I mean, like, because I was healthy for the first time in years because I wasn't trying to be someone who I used to be.
What's the takeaway there?
Acceptance is huge. And you have to be comfortable with who and where you are, and trying to force something, it just never happens. And also like the grace of saying, I am not who I was in 2015. And that's okay. I still have value. I still have goals. I still am a worthy person, but they're just different now.
Yeah, I think it's such a hard place to get to. It's easy.
Oh, it's hard to get
easy
to.
to say. And it's like, yeah, listen to the advice. So for someone listening who's like, yeah, that's me, you're describing me, is it really just the situational awareness that like this is happening to others and this is, happening to me, and put your head down and grit?
For me, I just got tired of not being happy. I got tired of playing this comparison game about who I used to be. And I'm like, I'm not her anymore, but I'm still cool, and I was just like torturing myself. Like, what am I doing? I know I'm not going to make the 2020 Olympic team. I know that by then my time will have passed. I can't go back in time. I'm living in this purgatory for what? Like, why am I doing this to myself? It's time to release a lot of it and meet me where I am.
So you have that realization. What was your next action?
To just totally set a new goal that would have sounded crazy 2 years earlier, which was to run 2:35 in Houston, which before I would have been like, why would I train for that? Why would I ask Mark and Heather to bike on long runs with me for that, But I thought that's a really realistic goal, and that's where I am. I loved training for that. I trained for Houston 2019. I was in Vegas with friends we were up till 4 a.m. at a concert. And the next day I got out and hit the track. Like I was so dedicated to this 2:35. And I already had said, I will not run the Olympic trials. This is just for me. And it was really unfortunate that day was really cold and I should have worn tights and I didn't. And my hamstring went, and it was really disappointing. But at the same time, it was like, this didn't cost me anything. Like it was just for me. So now I can refocus on something new, which ended up becoming Leadville.
And the hardest thing you've ever
The
done.
worst thing I ever did. Also the best because I survived it. But yeah, I mean, I literally was thinking I had a very painful delivery of my child. And I was thinking I would do that again right now. Right now, I would do that just to get out of where I am right now. I mean, such dark thoughts. I can laugh about it now, but
I mean, we talked about, you were like, I could just fall off this cliff.
I'm like, if a mountain lion walked around, I'd be like, okay.
Pick me.
I would turn around and run so it will grab me. I was in such a dark, hating all the decisions I've made. I was like, these fucking people are crazy. Why are they doing this? How did I get roped into this? Just so
How did you get roped
dark.
into it?
Oh, I volunteered. I'm like,
Right.
Mark and Heather, we had a meeting and they were like, we think you're running into really good form. We think you could run under 2:30. Do you want to try again this spring? And I was like, you know what? I don't. I want something new. I'm going to run Leadville. And they were like, okay. And it was all my choice. And that was the thing. Like nobody even asked me to do it. I just was like, hey, I want to come run your race, So it was all on me. And so at the end of the day, it fell on me. But I do remember I finished and I was like, I told Shanna Burnett, who was my agent at the time, I was like, I'm never running again. Don't ask me to do anything. She's like, okay. But you know how it is. Then, I think going to the awards ceremony was so helpful, but you get through it. As the soreness goes away, you're like, I could probably do that again.
So I watched all these people run 100 miles yesterday, and I was like, wow, this looks awful, but I want that.
I know. I saw you tweeted or something about like trying it to find out where. It's weirdly intriguing. My doctor is Coco Doogie, who's run Leadville before, and she's like, don't do it. Don't do it. She's like, if you want to do a 15-miler, okay. But she's like, unless you really, really want to do it, she's like, you have nothing to prove. Don't, do it to try to prove something. But it is so interesting to me because obviously physically these athletes are amazing, right? But mentally, these athletes are so much tougher than a lot of the athletes I used to run with. And I think that's what's intriguing about it. Like, could you be that? Like, I remember I won the Great North Run, and 5 weeks later, I was on the press truck at the New York City Marathon, and I watched Paula lead every single step of the marathon. The moment the gun went off, she was in the lead, and she led all the way for 26.2 miles. And I remember thinking, I want to know if I can be that tough, And so then I ran New York the same year. And it's kind of the same thing when you're around these ultra events. You're like, well, could I be that tough? Like, could I suffer and find a reason to go on? It's intriguing. But then, of course, it's awful.
I'm standing there watching at mile 40, and there's a woman vomiting. And then she's eating ramen. And then she's vomiting. And then she's eating ramen. And then she's taking electrolyte
like,
tablets.
Bye.
And then she smiles, and there's still like a mix of vomit and ramen on her face. And then she climbed up to Hope Pass.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying, right? You're like, is she insane? Or is there like some place that I could go where I could do that? And I do think I loved being a track athlete. I would be a track athlete in a heartbeat again if I could be that fast again. But there are very different sports, but the mental toughness of those 100 just ultra events in general they are so freaking tough because once you get to a certain point, everything in your body is telling you, stop.
Right.
You don't need to do this. Nobody cares.
Literally.
Everybody thinks you're crazy anyway, And so you have to constantly find it from within. And it's really impressive.
So as someone who's familiar with riding the line and that razor's edge, which we've talked about before, I'm curious your thoughts on racing a marathon versus doing a trail run like the Leadville Marathon, because a lot of these people that I talk to that run hundreds, like I'm fascinated. I'm obsessed with asking why. I'm so curious about why you would voluntarily choose to do something this many people would call crazy, but challenging. Many of these people will say, well, at least it's not a 5K. At least it's not a marathon. It's slower than that. And so here are these people who will voluntarily run for 24 hours saying a marathon is too hard. So as someone who's run some really hard and fast marathons and also done trail running, what's your take on that?
I do think it's two different athletes. I think there are athletes who could cross over, and we've seen some athletes cross over. I like Des Linden's another one that I feel like could cross over. But in general, I think they are very different athletes. And I don't know if you saw the video of the guy from Badwater crawling. That's my uncle-in-law. That's Adam's uncle. That's Adam's mom's brother. And he started running really later in life. I'm not trying to be mean, but like he's old, and he runs Badwater, and he just this crazy video. Everybody saw it, this man crawling. And that I'm like, I'm not that guy. You know what I mean? Like I admire him so much. And by the way, he's like the nicest person. Oh my God, he's like so amazing. But he is so like, I'm going to finish. I don't care if the cutoff is done. I don't care that my legs no longer work and that I have to crawl. And I think like the track marathon people are like, why would you do that? It's time to call it a day,
right?
And just focus on the new
Go
race.
Get your beer.
Yeah. Don't dig a deeper hole. Stop, and then let's go over here. And I think like the athletes that grew up through the track system, we are obsessed with times. That was one of the hardest things for me was shedding that because since I was 12 years old, my watch was only there to tell me if I was succeeding or not. My watch was only there to be like, yeah, you're nailing it, or no, you're not nailing it, right? Instead of people like, they don't care in the ultra world. I mean, of course they do. There's people trying to break records, but in general, people are like, it's the journey that matters, right? It's getting to the finish line that matters. And sometimes not, but it's all about the experience and not, they don't care about the watch.
Yeah. That's such an interesting comment, specifically related to the watch. So yesterday I got home from Leadville. I was like, wow, I'm pretty tired and I did a lot in the last 36 hours. Maybe I won't run today and I'll run Monday and switch my rest days and pull the week up. And I was like, you know what? Screw it. I have plenty of time today. I took my watch off and I put my phone on the table and I went for a run. And a couple miles into it, I'm tempoing. and I'm wearing my watch. I just never hit start.
Yeah.
And so at the point I realized I was tempoing, I was like, okay, I'm going to like see how long I do this for. It ended up being like 15 minutes. And I was like, I should back off at some point. So I backed off and then I started doing it again. And I didn't do a workout last week. I backed off entirely. So my legs felt fresh-ish, but I did a 4-hour adventure on Saturday. So I wasn't expecting to feel this good. And I get home and I was like, oh my God, this run was so much better than had I gone out with my phone and my watch and was like, oh, 8:30s. Yep, that's right where I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to my coach about it and he was like, let's do more of this.
Yeah.
And it's so fascinating how when you're not a slave to the watch, sometimes better things happen.
Yeah.
Or maybe they don't, but sometimes they do.
I will say, as I got later in my elite career, as I got older, I started to, we all know how long our afternoon double loop is, right?
Yeah, I ran 8.5 miles.
Right.
I know exactly.
You know exactly the loop. And so I started to do that because it was like, why am I getting upset? Because I feel like I ran for a coach that really felt like you had to run a certain pace or don't even bother logging it. And that really got in my head. And finally, I was just like, all that really matters is that I get the run in. I don't have to tell them what the time was.
Right.
Like, I'm a grown up, I'm a mom, I'm autonomous, and so.
But it's so hard to realize that,
it's
right?
So
it's like
hard
your legs
because
don't
you're like,
care.
well, is it a real run? Like, even Adam, my husband, like, we'll be doing little walk jogs with the dogs and he'll be like, damn it, I forgot to start my watch. Now I don't get credit. And I go, but you did it, and he's like, but I'm not going to get credit. And I'm like, see who we've become?
Yeah.
Like, it happened. Like, just because the watch doesn't tell you it happened. So I think it is important to do things like that where you don't start the watch or you just leave it because we know we're all obsessive. We know to the 10th of a mile what our loops are that we do.
Yeah. It's so liberating, right?
Yeah.
And I found myself thinking about this. I was like, it's so crazy that like I'm out running a tempo and I'll have no idea how fast I was running, but I was running the effort.
But that's the thing that I feel like we've lost a little bit of because you're young, but there was no such thing as a GPS watch.
Yeah.
Like the first time I went to Foot Locker, I was wearing a Swatch watch and I
don't even know what that is.
It was just like a super cool rubber watch and you could trade out the bands. And I would look and see what time it was. And then I would look as I finished my repeat, or I'd look when I finished my run. And I went out on the beach. They had this little run on the beach and everyone went bleep with their Timex watches. And I was like, oh my God, like I'm such a loser. But so I've seen the evolution of like Timex, like Swatch watch to Timex. I remember when the first GPS watch came out from Nike and I was in New York to run the New York City half. And Abdi and I were just doing like a shakeout run a couple days before. And he was like, why don't you have I can't remember what it's called, like Nike Plus watch or whatever. And I go, I'm just timing out my Timex. And he was like, but how do you know how far you go? And I go, how did you know last year? Like you've only had that thing for a year. But the funny thing is I fought it for so long and then I eventually fell into the trap. And so I do think that it's good to go without the GPS. I know then we miss our Strava day or our mileage doesn't add up as cleanly, but we remember what it feels like in our own bodies. And I feel like sometimes we get away from that when we're so obsessed with split times or mileage. You should be able to go out there and be like, yeah, this is about 7-minute effort. Yeah, this is about 8-minute effort. And I don't think a lot of people can without their watch.
I completely agree. And I'm definitely going to do more of it. I love Strava, like so much so that I manually uploaded the activity.
Yeah.
And just guessed what the pace was for the run. But it's just so fascinating that like we're such slaves to it.
Oh yeah. It's like, I can't run because I don't have my watch, And
we're like, oh, my watch is charging. I can't run yet.
Yes. And there's so much good that comes from the watches we have now. But I do think it, like, you remember when you're out there and you're suffering, it's you and yourself, right? You know, can I push more? Do I need to back off? Like, you need to be able to feel that and not let your watch tell you. Because sometimes the watch is telling you something that isn't matching up with how you're feeling. And the override should never be the watch.
Right.
It should be your inner space. Yeah.
If you've been enjoying this podcast and can spare 90 seconds of your time today, can you do me a favor? Can you pop over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review? It helps other people find and enjoy the podcast too. Thanks so much. Thanks again to Freedom Solar Power for supporting this episode of the podcast and our environment by providing an easy, green energy source. The buying process was fascinating and eye-opening, and I am excited to pay my learnings forward. If you're curious about going solar in your home, message me on Twitter or Instagram, and I'd be happy to help your journey by providing some great resources. Freedom Solar is a full-service solar company that's been installing solar panels and backup power systems since 2007. They operate in Texas, Colorado, Virginia, and Florida. Not in any of those states? Don't fret, my parents have the same panels from SunPower that were installed by a different company in Massachusetts. SunPower is the best in the business, and that's what Freedom Solar uses. I've enjoyed working with the whole team over at Freedom Solar, and I'm sure you will too. Thanks again to Tracksmith for supporting the podcast and their continued support of not just this podcast, but the running community in general. I'm proud to partner with Tracksmith, and they're going to donate 5% of your order to the Michael J. Fox Foundation for all orders, and you'll also get free shipping. The Michael J. Fox Foundation is dedicated to finding a cure and helping those living with Parkinson's. Both of my grandfathers have or had Parkinson's, and I'm grateful of Tracksmith's support for something so personal. Visit tracksmith.com/forthelongrun to see some of my favorite pieces, and all orders with the code FORTHELONGRUN, one word, will contribute towards this donation. Their spring collection is now available and features staples thoughtfully designed for this season of training. Previnex has amazing products that have benefit my health and the health of other runners that I know, which is why I'm so excited to introduce Previnex to you as our newest sponsor. They also have a killer everyday immune supplement called Immune Health Plus that I've been taking and will tell you about in a future episode, but I highly, highly recommend you check these out and try the products for yourself. One of the best parts is that if you don't experience benefits on any product within 30 days, they have a no questions asked 100% money back guarantee for a full refund. You have no risk and everything to gain here. Use code FTLR for 15% off your first purchase of any products at Previnex.com. That's Previnex.com. And I can't wait to hear about how these products are making a difference in creating health in your life. Thanks again to Goucher for supporting this episode. I have a few different styles of shades, and I've been loving them on runs or while at the pool. At $25 a pop, you can leave a pair in your car so that you'll never be without some shades. You can feel good about your purchase too, as 1% of Goucher's annual gross sales, not profits, go directly to environmental nonprofits working towards making our world a better place. If you'd like to support me in the show, treat yourself to a pair or two or three of Gouchers and head over to Goucher.com and get 15% off your entire order. That's 15% off at GOODR.com with the code FTLR. Your face will thank you. So switching gears to something that we talk about a lot on our Bobo adventures.
That's like the one place I can run, just so everyone knows. Like, if you see me at Bobo every day, it's because I'm having a good week and I can run every day. But like the only trail that I feel safe on is Bobo. So I like basically live there.
I too basically live there, but it's by choice. Sponsorship in 2022. You've been in the game for a while and you work with brands and you have sponsors and you also have relationships with athletes who are new to the sport. So I'm curious, what's your take on sponsorship in 2022? Very broad question, then we'll dive a little further into it.
I think the game has changed. I think like when I signed my first contract in 2001, so 20 years ago, it really was all performance-based because we didn't have social media, right? There was no way for people to access you unless they saw you in like Runner's World or Running Times or saw you racing fast. I don't think that the sponsorship is just totally changed. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with being an athlete that just wants to focus and just wants to be internally focused and get what they can get out of themselves. I do think an athlete like that will find it harder to find long-term sponsorship because the fans want to be in on that journey with you and want to ride that ride with you, the highs and the lows. So it's just really changed. And I think the more it's okay if you want to be closed off. I've seen like Cindy McLaughlin and also Abby Steiner shut their social medias down completely 2 weeks before a big competition. I love that. I think that's a really smart idea. But I also think that sharing those highs and lows are what engages fans to care about you, which makes you valuable to a company who's sponsoring you.
And so you're an advisor for Wazelle, right? Do you have a similar role with Ultra?
I don't know. With Ultra, we just do like fun projects together. You know, we did a thing on like eating disorders earlier this year, or the release of Shoe. I work a lot with the Paradigm, but I don't have an advisor role as far as like helping select athletes or what do we want to do with this extra money we have. I don't have a position like that.
What does that look like with Wazelle?
It's basically like Zoom calls where there's a few of us and we talk about, you know, who we think could be an interesting add to the team. Wazelle, very much so. If you want to be very, very private, we're probably not the right brand for you because we don't have a budget for a ton of marketing or anything like that. So we rely heavily on our athletes to tell their stories. But we talk a lot about like who is interesting to bring in, what are ways we could help the community. You know, if we had this budget of a few $1,000s, what's the best way to place that and do with it? How do we keep growing bras for girls, which is really a passion of Wazelle because it's true. If girls can't get sports bras, they drop out of sports. And it's a thing that males don't think about. But as a female, if you feel uncomfortable, then you're not going to do it anymore. So that program, getting bras to girls at a younger age and just things like that, we're always kind of like talking and scheming. And I would say about 1/10 of the projects come to fruition, but that's just reality.
That's business,
right?
Yeah. It must be such an advantage for you having been through it and now you're on the other side of that relationship. Well, you're still on both sides of it, right? With Ultra as well.
Yeah, I mean, Ultra has been so great, you know, like they know that originally when I signed with Ultra, I had dreams of breaking American Masters records. And when I realized that just like wasn't in the cards for me, I had to be really honest with them. And they were awesome about like, we just want to share the journey. Like not everybody gets to age gracefully or gets to do all those things that they had hoped they had done, but like you still love running. So,
but do you think that makes you more valuable to them?
I don't know.
Right? Because it's more relatable.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but you always want to have athletes though that you can aspire to, right? Like you need to have athletes that are doing great things because it just stretches what we think is possible. So, but that is one thing I will say. I think the sponsorship model has changed too. You don't just need those really amazing athletes that are performing well. You need some because we all want to be motivated. We all want to be inspired. But I think that used to be the only people that were given contracts. And now we're seeing a lot of other people with contracts, myself included, who will never run a fast time again, but who just love the sport and want to keep pumping it out and want to keep relating to people and meeting people and getting people involved.
And then people with podcasts.
People with podcasts. That's another hot Twitter topic, isn't it? The podcast thing. I mean, I didn't know that you could get paid for a podcast. I should be like a millionaire now.
Well, that's why we have all those wine and beer here for you.
I will say I've never seen so much swag for doing a podcast in my life as I have right here. Like I'm definitely taking that white wine with me.
Shout out to Goo Energy Labs for the hookup in Leadville.
This is like quite like I arrived and he was like, you can have any of these items that you want to take home. I'm like, what? There's like sunglasses, there's beer, there's wine, there's a cool hat. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah, great time to be a podcaster. You did join in on that conversation on Twitter though, didn't you?
I think I did. I think that we're all trying to survive, right? So we all want to make sure we're doing things that are within our bandwidth. You know, that's like a big term now, your bandwidth. And then that are like helpful to you and growing what you want to do or what you want to be. But I mean, I had never heard of someone getting paid to be on a podcast. And I'm not like trying to rip on it. I just like literally had never heard that. And I think I get asked to do a lot of podcasts. And there's a lot of podcasts that I say no to because I just don't feel like we're going to talk about anything different or whatever. And then there are some that I'll do that have like such a small following because you know what? I love them. They're from my hometown or they've always supported me or whatever. And so as an athlete, you can say no with kindness and that's okay. But you can also...
Or you can just say no.
Or you could just say no. Yeah, like actually you don't owe anybody anything. That's the Minnesotan in me that's like, explain why. But You also can say yes, and it can be mutually beneficial for you to be on a podcast, talk about things you're passionate about, have someone edit it and put it together in a platform where you can then share it, right? And then your sponsor's happy because there's more of you out there. So I think podcasts play a hugely important role for athletes, and I'm sure this topic will continue on, but I personally have never been paid for a podcast.
You heard it here first.
Actually, I am getting paid in white wine, so it's
it's under $600 in value, so you don't need to report it to the IRS. Great. Brad, if you're listening.
Great.
When I first reached out in 2019, I didn't know you well. We went to a November Project workout in New York, and Kevin Rutherford basically made the connection. And I remember when we sat down, I was like, you've done some cool stuff in the past. I don't really want to talk about any of it. Let's talk about doing new things and new adventures. And so I think the takeaway there is that like there are so many podcasts that are all chasing the same story. And it's race previews. It's talk to me about your last race. And there's definitely a time and a place for that. But what I love about this medium and how I run this podcast is like, it's different. Like Jesse Thomas said to me, you asked me questions I'd never been asked before.
Yeah.
I'm excited to share this. And so if you're a podcaster listening to this, my challenge is like, be better. Be like, Peter Bromk and I have talked about this a lot. He talks about how, or he tweeted one day, he was like, I need podcasters to like ask better questions. Don't just ask like, tell me about a failure. And then somebody talks about like, oh, well, I missed my, 235 at Houston. It's talk about how that felt, how that landed, what you did next, how it changed you, not just like checking the boxes of, okay, let's talk about this, let's talk about that. Yeah. It's one of the things that like I love most about this format where like I don't have any questions prepared. I said to Kate before you got here, I was like, so what should Karen and I talk about today?
What? Yeah, I love that too. Look, there is a place for you just did something huge in your career and everybody wants to hear about it. Absolutely. And that's fun to listen to and to hear what they went through. And we would find that with the Clean Sport Collective podcast, we would wait and give people time. Well, then no one would care because they'd already been on 4 podcasts. And they're like, well, no, I want to support clean sports, so I'll come on. But it was like, and
then you talk about something else.
Yeah. And so I think there is absolutely a need for that, but there's also a need for like, I like to just listen to people talking. And I think all of it obviously circulates around the quote unquote expertise that I bring to the conversation is really experienced through running, right? And that's like the thing we have in common and the thing it's based on, but then like it could go anywhere. Yeah. And I think I don't know. I think I did a podcast with Chad Somala this summer. He is from Duluth. I've known him forever. And I actually felt like it was one of the best podcasts I ever did. It got listened to by like, no offense, Chad, but not very many people. But I like really loved it because he knows me from back then, right? He doesn't know me since Osaka and beyond. I mean, he does, but not really. And so I felt like it was one of the most enjoyable podcasts I've ever done because we were talking about old stuff that I was remembering that have obviously played a huge role in who I became. But, that's why I like different podcasts and different points of view.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. Like, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, but the ones that I do listen to, it is more than just about the like, what have you done lately? It's like, I want to know who this person is and what makes them tick. Maybe that's just my own curiosity and like desire for like beyond surface level conversations. But it gets back to what you were saying around the transfer of value and connecting with the community and the audience. Like there are so many people out there doing such interesting things. And it's really interesting. It's like the overnight success in 10 years. I want to know about the 10 years. I'm less interested in the overnight or the like top of that peak.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about Sonia Richards-Ross, who I work with at NBC and who's now a real housewife of Atlanta. And of course I watch the show because I support her. But I love it when she posts old stuff, when she posts like her running at Texas. And I'm like, look at where this got her, Like I love all of that kind of stuff too. Like who were these people before now? How did they get here? Like they weren't born into glamour, right? Like they all had to come through something. So Yeah. And I think, like, look, no one has had a perfectly clean life. Everyone's had ups and downs. Everyone's had tragedy. Everyone's had triumphs. Everyone's had really big mistakes, some public, some not. And that's interesting,
Yeah,
right?
it's human.
Yeah, it's human. Like when I see someone win a medal or I see someone run a really great race when I'm commenting, the more I know about that person, the more goosebumps I get when it happens, because I know what they've done to be here. I have to tell you, watching that women's 10,000 meters at the US Championship is like a part of pre. And I watched it because it wasn't my job to call it. And I have never had so much FOMO in my life because I was like, there were so many stories I wanted to tell because I was like, this is one of the most exciting races we'll ever see at a US championship. All the storylines in here. And so, yeah, there's a lot of great stories and I think they're endless in track and field.
Your preparation for commentating is fascinating. I remember you telling or thanking me for the Sarah Vaughan podcast because that was you researched.
Oh, you were like, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm like, well, I do. I mean, I cram them in around athletes that I see performing well and stuff. But yeah, I listen to a ton of podcasts. I read a ton of articles. I love to find articles from their hometown paper because I feel like you learn a lot more.
It's
there.
like a writer who's not focused on sports, but like the actual journalism.
Yeah, and like a lot of times too, like when you get to that level, you kind of have a standard answer. Like, yeah, I'm here to win a medal. I believe I can. I learned a lot at the Olympics. I know I can compete with them. And you're like, yeah, the first time you hear it, but then you're like, okay. So a lot of times when you can first of all, get them on a podcast that goes off-road a little bit or like their hometown papers because they've known them since they were like, class 2A state champion, whatever, right? And so they are a little bit...
Middle school mile.
Yeah, their guard is a little down when they talk to people who really know them. And so those are my favorite. I mean, when the Duluth News Tribune writes about me, I get super pumped, even to this day, because I'm like, they watched me grow up, So I find those are like very, very helpful. But yeah, I listen to so many things. Yeah.
As you were talking, you were alluding to growth and like the individual adventure and journey. And I was thinking back to you skirting the question that I asked prior, which is, what is success?
Oh, what is success?
And so, I mean, it led to a fun conversation. But the reason I ask is I'm so fascinated with people who have achieved conventional levels of success or objective levels of success. I spoke with Gwen Jorgensen, and she's won an Olympic gold medal, something that many athletes aspire and dedicate their entire lives to. Her definition was fascinating, but also in line with what a lot of people say. So for someone like yourself who has done it at the highest level and is now, running with me, a hobby jogger, 8-mile runs, like, what is success to you?
I mean, success to me is just feeling whole. And, there were times like when my life seemed the most glamorous times of my life where I wasn't whole. And nothing was a success, right? Like there was this impossible standard that I couldn't meet or that I felt like I always fell short of. And so it's interesting now to feel more successful when I'm not good like that anymore. But at the time, success was like, I felt like I never won a major. I never won an Olympic medal. But then I'll have people who say, well, I never made an Olympic team, or I never did get a medal, or my husband will say, I never got a medal. I only made the Olympic team once. I think that world is so hyper-focused. And I get it because that's what's on the line. I look back at my career now with a lot more grace. And I'm like, I actually did really good, But at the time, I did not see it that way. It was always like, what's next? How do I fix this? How do I win this? And so my definition of success back then was being on the podium. And now it's really just feeling whole as a human and making sure that I feel connected to what I'm doing and the efforts that I'm making. If I feel that connection, it doesn't matter if it's an 8-minute mile run. If it makes me feel whole, I'm like, that was a successful run. That was a successful day because I feel like a human. I feel good.
So I know there are a lot of elite athletes that listen to this podcast, and there are also a lot of amateurs. And so if you were speaking to both groups around the pursuit of progress in sport with the context of success is feeling whole, success is, did I do things today that made me happy? That's the context that this answer is coming to the listener from. What would you say to someone who is struggling with like maybe identity in sport or happiness in sport and maybe they're in a rut or something like that, what would you say to them?
Well, one of the downsides of all the social media we have now is that it seems like everyone's succeeding but you, right? And so I think I'll use the 2016 Olympic trials as an example. Top 3 go to the Olympics. I finished 4th. And it was horrible. It was awful.
It was really hot too.
It was terrible. But I kept gut checking. Am I leaving everything out there that I can? And the answer was always yes. I am on redlining. I am running as hard as I can. And so, like, what I tell people is, was that race a success? It actually was. Even though the goal was to go to the Olympics and I was stuck at home watching it on TV like everyone else, I still ran the best I could. And so I think it's really focusing on ourselves and taking away what other people do. Like, you could run the best race of your life and still be 10,000th at the New York City Marathon. Well,
who cares?
Wasn't that a success?
Yeah.
It was the best freaking race of your life. And I feel like the comparison game traps us a lot on the elite level for sure, but I'm sure on the amateur level as well. And we need to like really focus on, like, did I bring my best effort? Did I do everything right? And if the answer is yes, then I don't care where you finished. That was a screaming success.
It's so interesting because I started asking similar questions at the beginning of the pandemic when I started doing a lot of podcasts in a time when I was feeling so disconnected to everyone. And I was asking people, like, fast forward 5 years. We're through this in theory. Well, now we're 3 years.
We're just pretending like we are.
Now we're just pretending like we are. Anyway, and it was Vanessa Fraser that answered this for the first time. And I said, like, fast forward 10 years, what are you really proud of? And expecting her to say winning an Olympic medal, blah, blah, blah. Growth, progress, knowing that I did everything to be the best version of myself that I could be. I was like, that's interesting. I would not have expected that answer. So I've probably asked, I don't know, another 100 people that same question. And many of them, most of them have answered in a similar way that you answered. And so the piece that I find to be so fascinating is that here are 100 people that have achieved what society might consider excellence or success, or you've won a medal, or whatever it might be. And these people are answering questions about what success means in totally subjective ways that they own and can control, right?
Right.
You didn't say, I want to win, a master's. I want to keep doing things that make me happy, whether it's running with Colt and the 10K or a 50 miler one day. I do want to ask more questions about that. It's just so fascinating that this is where people at your level go when asked, what does it mean?
Yeah, because,
have you thought about that?
Well, I mean, I think there's this mourning period when you come out of elite athletics of like, oh, I'll never do that again. I'll never have that again. Like I said, I couldn't have been a broadcaster during that mourning period, but you're still a person, right? And I think when you're like an elite athlete, you're always like focused on something you want. And it's really hard to just let that go. Like, it's really hard to be like, and now I'm just gonna cheer people on.
Right.
It's like, well, I still want to work towards something. Right now I'm working towards, I want to run a 10K on the roads. And even though I've been told by one doctor it's impossible, that is my goal right now. And I'm going to get out there and I'm going to get the Botox and I'm going to keep going until I can get that. And you know what? If I do that, it will be better than any Olympic medal. Even though I know that sounds corny, but it will, right? And so you don't have to give up the wanting something, the trying for something, but it just sort of shifts to something else. And like, it shifted to me. I want to see if I can run 50K. Now I want to see if I can run with my son. Like, it just kind of shifts. And so you never have to let go of that trying something that's a little bit scary, that's a little bit hard. It just looks very, very different.
Do you ever visualize Folsom Field with Colt and running around that loop?
Yeah. I mean, like, I really want this. And, we went to watch it this year because he had one of his teachers was running and a bunch of our friends and these twins that we know that work at the grocery store. And Adam and Colt and I, we were the saddest cheers you've ever seen because Adam has been banged up in his knee. I can't run on pavement. Colt didn't want to run without us. And then as he's watching everyone, he was just, the jealousy was like coming out of his skin. And we just turned around. We were like, this is happening next year. We're going to be back. We're going to do this. And so I imagine running and I'm scared that it won't happen. But guess what? Goals are scary. I mean, I am scared. Like if I'm being totally honest with you, I'm really scared that it's not going to happen. And then I'm going to have to accept that. But then there's the other part of me that's like, nah, it's going to happen. I'm going to be there. And I'm going to run onto Folsom Field. And that'll actually be the hardest part because they have those super slick tiles down, and the smoother the
Better not be
surface, the harder
raining.
it is for me. Yeah. And so that'll actually be the hardest part, but I'm going to do it. And I just believe I am. Yeah.
So you've talked a lot about or alluded to community and those around you and the running community, the elite running community, the amateur running community. What does community mean to you?
Just supportive people, right? Like I seen the joy on people run Boulder. Like it was so awesome that all these people are doing something that not all of them love it. It's a thing they do once a year, but like they're having fun, they're embracing each other. For me, sometimes I fantasize about like moving into the woods and like never seeing anyone again. And you know what makes me feel like I could never do that is because I was like, who would I run with? I'm like such a social runner, and it's such a huge part of my social life is running and seeing people and saying hi and stopping and quick catching up. So for me, it's like supporting at every level, starting with supporting, my son and his adventures, and then supporting like when CU has home meets, we always go. And it's just showing up for other people because you never know who might need you or who would appreciate that you were there. But that's how the running community is in general. I mean, if it wasn't for Todd Straka, I never would have finished the Leadville Marathon. I was like, kill me now. I saw him and I go, where do I go to drop out? I popped out of the woods and he's like, well, there isn't. And I go, can you call Adam? He will get something up here. And he was like, well, why don't we just keep walking, And that walk turned into almost 5 miles. And the next thing I know, he's like, it's all downhill from here. And I'm like, damn it. Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. And then other people would run with me. And that's what I love. And like, they'd get me through a next half mile or whatever. And that is so important to me. And I think that's why I have really just always embraced the running culture. Like the girls that I first ran with are still my friends.
Yeah.
And we're old ladies now. We're all in our mid-40s, but we are still friends. We are on a text chain together. We get together once a year. And running just really bonds you to other people. When you're running, you can't put up a wall because you're running, you're already tired. Like, I can't help but just be nice to you and open up. You know what I mean? Like,
that's a Minnesota in you.
Well, that's not, a little bit. But no, I feel like I've gotten so close to people in running because you just let your guard down because you're physically not suffering, but you're working. So it's like, I can't have this wall up and pretend to be so cool. I'm just going to be who I am, who is like also kind of cool.
I completely agree. It is so awesome to share the miles. Like you, I love running with other people. Those workouts we shared together last June.
Oh yeah, those were
May
so
and June.
fun.
That was so fun. I was like, how did I get to a place where like you told me you were at your limit or something like that? I was like,
you had me on the ropes. Yeah.
That was so fun. It was like I joked. I was like, that was the fittest I'd ever been, and you were just getting back into running.
So what? That's what it's so cool about it, right?
The intersection was incredible.
Yeah. You had me on the ropes big time. But yeah, and I love that. Like I love jumping into other people's workouts, which again, I never in the past I would be like, no, I'm going to do my workout. But like I love jumping into other people's workouts. Like when you were doing those workouts, I had a friend that was here altitude training for Chicago. Right now, I'm helping a friend get ready for New York, and I have those are probably my favorite days is jumping in other people's workouts, trying to help, trying to hold on or whatever it might be. I find I have so much joy doing that.
It is much appreciated on the other end as well. So we talked about looking forward. Now let's look back. If you could talk to 25-year-old Kara, what would you say?
Buckle up. I think, I grew up in a very loving home, but with a lot of chaos. For most of my childhood, my mom was remarried for 10 years, and it was very chaotic. And then, even when I went to CU, when I started running well, like when I would win a national title, I wouldn't celebrate. I'd just start crying, So I hate confrontation. I hate fighting. I hate all those kinds of things. But I think that sometimes being afraid to anger someone or being afraid to maybe have an uncomfortable conversation with someone really held me back of who I truly was.
Yeah.
And so I think if I could talk to my 25-year-old self, I'd be like, A, eat better. And then B, like, don't be afraid of who you are. Like, don't feel like your voice doesn't matter, Like, don't talk yourself out of it just because you grew up on Spam in northern Minnesota. You know what I mean? Like, you have value. You have a lot of value.
Awesome. I think that's a great reminder. What's so interesting is that sometimes these things that a younger version might have needed to have heard is something that someone, like, I get messages all the time about this question in particular. Like, yeah, she was speaking directly into my soul with that. And it's so cool that, like, what a shared experience all of this is, that the stuff that you've gone through can help somebody else and who's like in it right now and might not even know. But they're like, then they look at you and they're like, oh, well, she made it through, so maybe I can too.
Yeah, I think we're all way more similar than we think. And whenever I talk about my ups and downs, people say, "Oh, I related to that even though it was about my job." But that's the same thing, right? Like, we're all going through hard times, we're all having good times. And that's what I love about the running community is I feel like not everyone, but a lot of people let their guard down and share that. And you don't feel so alone,
Totally.
Like, when I was younger, there was no one being like, oh, Kara, I know you've gained 30 pounds and you're like, what the hell's going on? But just stick with it, And that's why I feel like it's important that I say that to them now.
Totally. I think my last question is around your next run. What are you going to think about as you take the first steps of your next run?
My next run's tomorrow morning. And I'm going to be thinking about how the next morning I'm getting Botox in my fabulous left leg. And I'm going to be thinking about how this is the last bad day for a while because tomorrow things are going to get better.
Cool. I love it. Kara, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
And I always say we'll see you out there when
I'll
I close
see you
this
in the next day or so.
We'll literally see you out there.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next time on For the Long Run, and in the meantime, happy trails. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too. This podcast and the accompanying music has been produced by Brian Walters of Single Track Sound. For the Long Run's logo was created by Vanessa Wolf of Sterling Wolf. Show notes have been written by Ruby Wiles and is managed by Emily Holland. It takes a village.